On a quiet street in Atchison, Kansas, stands a house people don't like to talk about. From the outside, it doesn't look unusual, just another old home from the late 1800s. 2 stories, white siding, a simple porch. Ordinary, if you didn't know better. But the locals know. They've felt it. That weight in the air when you walk past, that pull in your gut that tells you not to look too long at its windows. Because the longer you do, the stronger the feeling grows, that someone, or something, is looking right back. Inside, people describe the silence as unnatural. The walls creak, the air grows heavy, and it feels as though the house itself is aware of your presence. Visitors often say they can't shake the sensation of being watched, followed, studied. Even standing in the entryway, many feel an invisible presence pressing close, refusing to let them feel alone. It isn't just imagination. Too many people have reported the same thing for too many years. Ghost hunters, locals, even skeptics who came to disprove it, most leave with the same uneasy confession. There's something in that house. And it doesn't sleep. The story most people hear about the house begins with a little girl. Her name was Sallie, at least, that's what the legend calls her. She was brought into the home of Dr. Charles Finney, who both lived and practiced medicine inside those walls. The child was sick, gripping her stomach, crying in pain. The doctor feared appendicitis. Time, he thought, was against her. The details that followed have twisted into something darker over the years. Some say he acted too quickly, cutting before the anesthesia could take hold. That Sallie screamed and thrashed as the scalpel touched her skin. Others insist it wasn't neglect, but simply a failed attempt to save her life. However it happened, one fact remains: the girl died inside the house. And that's when the stories begin. Not long after her death, people claimed to see the fleeting shadow of a small child wandering the rooms. Toys left on the floor would move. Disembodied giggles, soft and high-pitched, echoed through the empty air. The image of a little girl, innocent, lost, trapped, took root. But over the years, the legend shifted. Investigators and residents began to question whether the presence in the house was really Sallie at all. For while she appears as a child, what follows is not playful, nor innocent. Visitors have been scratched, shoved, even burned. Men, in particular, report violent attacks. A question began to haunt the investigators as much as the house itself. Is Sallie truly a little girl, bound forever to the place where she died? Or is that image only a mask, hiding something much darker that waits behind her name? In the early 1990s, Tony and Deborah Pickman moved into the house at 508 North 2nd Street. They didn't come chasing ghost stories. They were newly married, starting a family, looking for a place to call home. For a time, it seemed like just another old Kansas house. But the strangeness began almost immediately. Lights flickered without cause. Cold spots lingered in the air. Their dog would stand rigid in the hallway, growling at something unseen. At first, they brushed it off. Old homes make noise, after all. Then toys began to move on their own. Objects rearranged themselves. At night, Deborah swore she could hear the faint sound of a child's voice, giggling from the darkness. Soon, the house's influence crept inside Tony's own mind. He began experiencing dark, violent thoughts, impulses he feared he might act on. The feelings were strongest at night, when the shadows were deepest. He fought to suppress urges to harm those closest to him, Deborah, the dog, anyone in the house with him. But the temptation lingered like a whisper he could not escape. Nightmares followed him into sleep. He dreamed of shadows dragging him through the hallways, of invisible hands raking across his skin, of being forced to strike those he loved. Each dream left him trembling and unsure if he could trust his own hands when he woke. And then, the house pushed him past the brink. One evening, Tony acted on the presence's influence and harmed the family cat. The event terrified him, shaking him to his core. Even as he recoiled from his own actions, the house seemed to pulse with a quiet satisfaction, as though it had proven its power over him. The Pickmans' lives became a battleground. The activity escalated into scratches, bruises, and attacks that could not be explained by fear or imagination alone. Every creak, shadow, and whisper seemed calculated to break their minds as much as their bodies. Finally, the activity grew too violent to ignore. The house seemed to target Tony in particular, tearing at him until he could no longer stay. The Pickmans fled, leaving behind the home they thought would be safe. And in their wake, they left the story that would make the Sallie House one of the most infamous haunted homes in America. Not long after the Pickmans fled, the house opened its doors to investigators, skeptics, and thrill seekers. Few lasted long. The first thing people reported was the feeling of being watched. That was almost constant, but for many, the sensation didn't stay harmless. It became physical. Visitors walked out with burning red welts across their backs, sometimes discovered only after they felt the sting of blood against their shirts. Others felt sudden cuts opening across their arms and legs, marks that hadn't been there seconds before. One investigator recalled a sensation like invisible claws dragging slowly down his spine, each line of fire deepening until he could no longer stand. Another described being shoved violently against a wall, breath crushed out of his lungs by hands that weren't there. The attacks seemed to fall more often on men, some left with scratches, others with bruises the size of fists. A few reported burns, angry red patches on their skin that seared as if pressed by something hot, though no source could be found. And then there were the shadows. Some described the fleeting figure of a little girl, darting at the edge of vision. But when followed, the shape grew darker, stretching, twisting, until it towered impossibly tall. One man swore he saw the child's face for a split second, only for it to melt away into a black, faceless void. The most chilling accounts weren't of what people saw, but what they felt. Cold hands gripping ankles, breath on the back of the neck, something brushing past in an empty room. In the silence, some heard laughter, a high-pitched giggle that always ended too low, too guttural, to be human. No matter how many times investigators returned, the result was the same. The house didn't just want to be seen. It wanted to touch, to mark, to remind everyone who entered that they were not in control. For some, the scratches healed within days. For others, the scars lasted much longer. And still, the question lingered, was the house acting through its residents? Could it push a man to violence, bending even his thoughts toward dark impulses? It isn't only the scratches and bruises that terrify those who enter the Sallie House. It is the sound. Investigators, armed with cameras, recorders, and ghost hunting equipment, often capture something the eye cannot see. Batteries drain inexplicably, cameras fail in the middle of recordings, and devices flicker as though something unseen is drawing energy from them. Then there are the voices. Soft, high-pitched giggles echo through empty hallways. Whispers brush against your ears, words you cannot fully make out. Sometimes they plead, get out, or stay forever. Other times, they threaten, low and guttural, as if the very air has turned against you. EVPs, electronic voice phenomena, have caught the little girl's voice speaking in short, chilling bursts. But it is rarely innocent. Skeptics report that the tones shift, growling beneath the surface, the childlike quality warping into something monstrous. Many investigators describe an almost unbearable tension when these sounds appear. Some feel fingers trace down their arms, even when no one is near. Some hear footsteps pacing behind them, stopping the instant they turn. One teen recorded a loud bang in the hallway, followed immediately by the sound of rapid, small-footed running. They rushed to the room, empty. Not a sign of life. Not even a displaced object. The house seems to speak in its own language, a mixture of laughter, sobs, growls, and silence. And in that silence, those who listen feel a presence, waiting, always waiting. The voices are not playful. They are not pleading for attention. They are a warning, a reminder that the house at 508 North 2nd Street is alive in ways that cannot be measured by science, but can be felt in the pit of the stomach, and in the sudden, sharp rise of panic that makes the hair on your neck stand on end. And sometimes, just sometimes, it feels as though the house is laughing at you, before the next shadow passes, the next scratch appears, and the next story begins. The Sallie House still stands, quiet on North 2nd Street. To a passerby, it may look ordinary, but anyone who has stepped inside knows the truth. The house does not rest. It does not sleep. It does not forgive. Visitors continue to report scratches, bruises, cold spots, and fleeting shadows. EVPs still capture the giggles, the sobs, the guttural growls that seem to echo from walls that should be empty. Even skeptics leave uneasy, their confidence eroded by a weight they cannot see but cannot ignore. Some come seeking thrill, others to test their courage, but all leave changed. Some with injuries, some with questions they cannot answer, some with the simple, inescapable knowledge that something inside watches. And the house waits. It waits for the next curious visitor. The next person who steps too close, who dares to linger in the rooms that have been witness to death, grief, and violence. It waits, patient and knowing, until it can remind him exactly who is in control. For the Sallie House is not haunted. It is alive. And when you hear a faint giggle in the corner of a dark room, or feel the sting of unseen claws on your skin, you know the truth. It has been waiting for you all along. Thank you for hanging around until the end of our tale. Every view is appreciated. If you have enjoyed it, please hit that like button and considering commenting and subscribing.